Hi, everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming. I also wanted to thank our panelists for joining me today. I got so much respect for these developers. So along with me here, I've got my good friend Doug Holder, also from Naughty Dog. And a little bit down the table, we've got Matt Vainio and Darren Bridges from Sucker Punch. And we got Justin Hendry and Joel Emslie from Respawn Entertainment. So yeah, today we're basically going to be talking about AAA combat and the kind of stuff that we have to go through to put together the kind of high-quality, unforgettable experiences that we try to deliver to our audience. There's a lot of crazy little things we have to do, a lot of unexpected stuff that we have to go through to make these things work out well. So we're going to get into that right now. My name is Anthony Newman. I was the Melee combat designer on The Last of Us. And so I just want to talk a little bit about Melee and the kind of tricks that we use to make that system work out well. So The Last of Us is a story about real human characters, and the Melee combat tries to emphasize that with a lot of close camera angles and an emphasis on facial animations. So we set up the combat to allow for a lot of situations where we can really focus on the emotional confrontation that's happening. We found that facial expressions did way more in presenting the brutality of the situation than any amount of blood or gore kind of ever would. So that's what we were going for. Let's talk about how we did it. So at the core of The Last of Us Melee system is synced animations. These have been around for a long time. The super cool grabs from God of War when you're ripping off the Minotaur's arm and all that kind of stuff. That's basically, the core of the system is getting two animations to play well together. So at a very basic level, the way our engine does this is there's like a coordinate, there's a point that's put in the world, and both of the characters playing the animation know about that point, and they play their animations at the same time around that point. So that sounds super basic, but to make it happen gracefully and in a way that doesn't look like crap to the player is a bit of a challenge. There's a lot of little tricks we have to do to make that happen. So we're going to start with a bad example of what not to do. So this is one of my favorite moves in the game. It's a pretty awesome move from Ellie, but something isn't quite right about it, and we're going to take a look at it in slow motion so you can see what that is. So looking at it a little slower, you'll see that when Ellie goes to stab the guy, he actually stands up to get hit, which makes no sense. Like he's like presenting his neck to be stabbed by Ellie. And this is a bad blend. Like they're getting into this synced animation, and it's doing it in a way that looks unnatural to the player. Unfortunately, for a lot of reasons, we had to ship with this, and it just didn't work out to fix it. But let's try looking at a better example. So here we have Joel totally killing a dude. And you'll notice that the guy's facing at kind of an odd angle, and he has to kind of blend into the sync of facing Joel in order to kind of receive the strike from the axe. So if we take a look at it in slow-mo, you'll see how big of a pop there really is in between like where he was before and where he is now. The thing is that because it happens really suddenly and it's hidden by the impact of the axe, you think the guy's just spinning because of how hard you hit him, not because of some unnatural reason that doesn't make sense in the game world. So this is, we have these moves where we slam guys into the wall, and they look super cool, so we wanted to make them happen as frequently as possible, which meant allowing you to do them from really far away. And so this move looks pretty good. But if we look at it from a different angle, we can see there's a really crazy slide here. Awesome. Yeah. But the thing is, like, due to the nature of the animation, like, it looks like you're just shoving him that distance, and from the perspective of the player, you don't even notice it's happening. So that allowed us to make these moves happen a lot more frequently and hide the kind of trickiness that we're doing from the player. And so, yeah, just from a technical perspective, it's these moves work the exact same way, where the system places a point against the wall, and both characters sync around that point, and that's how we're able to get the sync to line up with the environment correctly every time. I'm just going to talk really quick about cameras. To show the action off well, we had to do a lot of tricky stuff with our cameras. In this screenshot, you can see all those little crosses that are around the two characters. Those are all different animated cameras. And so why do we need so many different cameras? Let's take a look. So when I'm getting slammed into a wall, you'll see right now the camera is on the right. This is an animated camera, so we can get in really close, and the animators can have control over what you're seeing. But if I run backwards into the corner, now the camera's on the left. And the reason for that is if the camera was still on the right, it'd be crammed up against the wall. You'd either be like clipping through the wall, or you'd have to shove it so close that it would look terrible. So that's why we have multiple cameras, is because of the collision and level, we need to have backups in case one of the cameras isn't going to work out. So if we look at that same clicker move from before, at each of the different cameras, the way it works is it does a collision check for every single frame of the animation ahead of time. It like looks ahead. And if any of those lines are going to cross an object, that camera fails, and it uses one of the backup objects. So the clicker kill was a really important move, and so it always had to look good, so we had to have 7 backup cameras just to make sure it worked. We also had to do some funky stuff with flashlights. So here we have the normal flashlight. It's coming from Joel's shoulder and facing away from him, and that's kind of what you would expect from the shoulder-strapped flashlight. But when you get killed by a clicker, something incredibly magical is happening here, where somehow the flashlight is now going into them. And the reason is because we actually hand place, for a lot of these animations, we hand place a flashlight location just to make sure that you can see the move. And we have to like kind of do the seamless blend between the normal flashlight into the melee flashlight to make sure you can kind of cleanly see the move in the dark. So at Naughty Dog, we have pretty high technical requirements of all our designers, and a ton of our work is in scripting. So this is kind of like HTML or CSS or JavaScript or something. It's like higher level code. It's not real C++, but it's code nonetheless. This lets us take a lot of work off of our programmers and lets them focus on the crazy technical stuff that they need to do. So this is what Melee looks like in the code. So this is like a super simplified example of a fight move. Basically, it's a pair of animations that play in sync. There's a priority, so if different moves can happen at the same time, this is how it picks what move to happen. There's a start function, which basically says, am I allowed to play this move right now or not? In this case, it's like, am I within 4 meters of the enemy? And then there's the event list, and this is like the bulk of what happens in the move, so anything like doing damage, playing an animated camera, transitioning to another move, all that stuff happens within the event list. So what's kind of interesting about implementing a system like this is a lot of times things that should be simple end up actually being very complex. So if you guys remember the move where if a clicker is attacking you, you can press triangle to save yourself with a shiv, that feature that we had. So this was the code for that feature. The reason it's so long is because we had male and female infected, and the female infected had to have their own animations because they had a different rig. I also had to manage the durability of the shiv, and there was an upgrade to the skill that would make it play out differently, so that ended up being crazy complex. So you guys might remember this moment from the E3 demo way back when at the Sony press conference. And I just want to take a look at how we make it easy for the player to reproduce this moment on their own. So this is the move that the NPC is in when he's down on his knee, like trying to struggle to get back up. And when the NPC is in this move, I've got a command that allows auto-aim. So whenever you aim at them, you'll always aim at their head. And then there's this function here that says, if the gun is aimed at me, I should transition into the begging for my life move. And that's the move where that has the voice acting and the facial animation that makes them look like they're begging for their life. And so now we can see what that looks like in actual gameplay.
Don't do anything stupid now, okay? No, please.
And on that note, I'd like to hang it off to Doug.
Oh, man. Yeah. So I'm Doug Holder. I never like saying my last name, so that was for you guys. Are you guys nervous? No? Yeah. It's okay. Me neither. On The Last of Us, I worked as an effects artist, and one of the things that we had to do was we had to add blood to the characters. We hadn't done that as a studio before because all of our previous games were, not of that kind of nature. So this posed a difficult challenge for us to try to tackle because all of our characters, like we have these, each of them has like a unique rig, like Anthony was saying, and different types of UV layouts, which is like how their textures are applied to them. So I made some pretty slides for you guys. They're pretty. I'm gonna jump right into some of this stuff. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, that's a good one. Okay, yeah. So some of the problems that we had to try to tackle was that we wanted the blood to make sure that it was a visual reminder of your actions. So you are making choices to attack these guys and you're inflicting damage upon them and that kind of stuff, but enemies don't have health meters above their heads and things like that, so it's good to kind of know what kind of damage you're inflicting on people around you and also on Joel. We also wanted to make sure that we were being tasteful about the blood, we're not just being super gratuitous, even though, as you can see, some of those moves that Anthony was throwing out there are pretty crazy. So we wanted to make sure that it gave the combat experience some weight. Also, one of the things that our team specifically wanted to try to tackle was we wanted to make sure that it gave this, emotional resonance with the players, so that you're hitting these guys or you're shooting them while they're down, and you feel bad about it. I mean, you don't want to it is fun to kind of engage in these visceral actions, but at the end you're like, oh wow, I really did some gnarly stuff to that guy. And also a level of permanence. The enemy characters, any blood that you put on them, and we actually had a lot of code that our programmers put in to make sure that if you loaded up a game sometime after I think in the coal mine, enemies would still be where they were, and then we did a bunch of stuff to make sure the blood was still on them. I'm going to get into how we did that. So we called them blood masks, and the idea is that every character would have a render target or a buffer. It's just an area where basically we have this off-screen rendered texture that we applied to characters. And every time you inflict damage on them, we would draw these particles to this buffer, and each channel represented a different part of the character. So red was for the heads of the characters, blue was for their arms, and then we had an alpha channel that was for their jackets, which is what you saw in Joel. So let's see, yeah, so I said all that stuff, that's great. I should have done all that stuff, yeah, okay. Oh yeah, so the other cool thing that our lead effects artist, Eben Cook, did was he made these shaders for the particles. So over time, they would kind of do this erosion threshold thing. So over time, they kind of bleed in and draw more pixels to the buffer and that kind of stuff. And we had to do some unique ones for clothing because clothes don't get bloody and they soak up differently the way, rather than being on your face and whatnot. This one is... Okay, so this is just a quick video to show all characters are basically flooded with blood. Joel is just covered in blood, and that's usually how I worked. I was I just see characters all the time, they're just super bloody. And then we would be able to use our debug menu to flip that back and forth and kind of see some stuff. So I have a video kind of showing it in action in slow-mo. So this is an execution where you shoot a guy up close, and what we did was we wanted blood spatter to get on Joel's face. So this is an example of it's drawing on his arm because he took some damage, and then if we clear the buffer, all the blood just kind of disappears from his face. But these are the kind of subtleties that we wanted to make sure that, if you got a close-up view of him, you'd be like, wow, he's, been through some crazy stuff. And that's pretty much it. That's, yeah. So I'm going to pass it on to the infamous guys.
Oh, good Lord. Oh boy. That was
All right.
close.
We've passed it once and we haven't dropped it, so
We haven't hit the water.
things are
yet.
going well.
This is good. This is good. Let's see if we can maybe not drop it.
Hasn't made it here yet.
Yeah, there's still hope. There's still time.
Still hope to
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
That's my computer, you guys.
Whatever.
Hey everybody, I'm Matt Vainio, and this is Darren Bridges. We're from Sucker Punch, and today we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the neon powers from infamous First Light, which just launched last Tuesday. We thought it would be nice and current. Specifically, what we're going to talk about is how we created the memorable and intense moments such as melee combat, neon dashes, and Fetch's ultra power, the Singularity. We're also going to talk about the various tools that we use to affect the emotional impact of each ability. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, whoa, let's go make sure it actually advances. Do we not advance?
Yeah, I left in that old one, sorry. That's my bad.
All right, so we're going to talk about melee combat, and Darren's going to talk a little bit about that.
So Fetch's power is neon, and the previous game, Second Son, Delson had neon power as well. The pillars for neon are kind of like, I mean, neon's light, you know, it's fast, and so it was supposed to be precise, like a laser beam, and then also very fast. And so we'd had elements of that on Delson's character, but we really wanted to blow it out with Fetch. When we were looking at neon or melee combat, we didn't want her to have a weapon, and we wanted to have her punches be really fast and really fluid, like almost as fast as you can push the button. So next slide. And then also, if you guys ever played Battletoads on the NES?
No.
Like that was one of our reference points actually for this character, because you have like she's super powered, so she has these really fast punches, but then the last punch is a really big hit. It's really big. Like in Battletoads, their fists would grow really big, but we didn't do that. Maybe next game.
We should have tried it.
So elements with melee, we really wanted to sell the impact, kind of like when you watch wrestling, and they, you know that they're not hurting them that bad, but they do everything they can to amplify the moment and make you feel it. And it's a superpower game, so we want that, it's a lot of the game is making you feel that superpower, feel like you're awesome because you are.
If you bought the game.
If you bought the game, yeah. Some of you may not yet be awesome. The three elements I wanted to hit, basically anticipation, impact, and then kind of follow through and reaction. And we'll see elements of that in the videos that we have to show. If you guys have ever had someone snap you with a rubber band, you get you pull it back. I don't have a rubber band, I almost brought one, but that's anticipation. Like you can sit there and Matt will sweat. As long as I have this here, he'll sweat. That's feeling of anticipation. And I may never hit him, but he still had an emotional experience based on that. So using that as a tool to kind of to amplify the combat is something we try to do.
An example of some of the melee combat here in slow motion. We actually pause our animation during the melee move for just a brief frame and kind of hitch it to give you a little bit more chance to see what she's doing. And here's going to be some of the melee combat actually in real time. You see it's significantly faster than Delson. And like Darren said, her combat will end in kind of a finisher move to actually knock him off of there.
Yeah, so this laptop is like totally in my way of seeing what's going on. It's perfect.
She's punching.
She's punching good.
Just watch it reverse in the mirror.
Oh yeah. It's
And it
backwards,
looks really
like,
cool when she's punching too.
So you can get the Battletoads vibe a little bit, that punch, and then a big hit to knock them. We did a lot of tuning on the timing of this, so when you see the guys get hit, this is a combat training room. So these are kind of virtual, they're apparitions, they're hard light objects. We did a lot of work on the timing to make it the balance of, like, first we had it, she would hit them and they would explode, but that felt kind of like they're soap bubbles. It didn't feel very impactful. So then we had them just go flying and fall to the ground, and that didn't feel right either. So what you see here, she'll hit them and then they'll go and then they'll explode. So you get as much, like we're trying to get as much effects on the screen and like, yes, awesome, more awesome. It's a superpowers game. That's what we're trying to do.
Next one. And we'll play. There we go. All right, so here with Fetch's melee swings, you can see that she's totally unleashed. She's full of rage, which was one of kind of our pillars for the game. And you can see this because she's got these wild swings, right? She isn't precise. She's throwing these hooks and these hammer fists. She's not throwing these straight, controlled martial arts style punches. But, there's an explosion at the termination point of each swing. You can see that her hands are just detonating in rage. Lastly, as she's swinging, her whole body is coursing with neon energy. We just really want to drive home the fact that these powers are driving her punches. She's not really hitting people because she's a boxer. She's infused with neon and using that as a moment to sort of cause small explosions near people's heads, basically.
Which is what I would do if I had powers.
Yeah, sure. That's what I did. Let's make sure I go to the next one. So we also added this melee finisher move to kind of further enhance her kind of unrestrained combat style. She basically dashes at her enemies and then kind of reforms just before kicking them. This is, when I play this, if you're in the office ever, you'll hear me yelling out, "This is Sparta," like as I just kick them off the ledge. That's like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite moves in the game. So this is a great example of anticipation. So you can see right before the impact, we're slowing down the action and giving you a chance to see her pose. You see the enemy about to get hit, and it's just like me with the rubber band. You get that second of like, oh, here it comes, and then bam, we do the impact, and then we do the follow-through of the enemy getting thrown and then exploding.
Particularly when she does her neon dash attack here, and after this, she'll cause the guy to levitate, and then she gets to, kick him right out of the air, which is super fun.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Well, let's go back one. Let's go back.
Back in time.
All right. You never saw those. All right, we're going to talk now about Neon Dash. Next visit, you want to talk about here?
So Delson had Neon Dash as one of his powers, so we wanted to amp it up for Fetch. She's the pure neon conduit, so everything neon that she does, we wanted to make even more
neon
amped up. Like she's like the pure dose. Okay. There's no video. Okay, all right. I'm sure you guys are very interested in my inability to read the slides. Very exciting.
Just a little reflection.
Yeah. It's back. The words are backwards. Okay. So perception of speed. This is one of my favorite moments in development. I knew that we were on the right track. So we had done the initial pass at her running, and we'd done all the tricks that we knew to try and make her feel faster than Delson. And our director of development came over to my desk, and he's like, I like what it feels like, but you got to understand we have a streaming limit on the game. Like there's the hexes, or the game can only stream in so fast, and you're clearly transgressing it. And I said, aha, no, I'm not. I only made you think I am. It was actually within the rules, but all the tricks that we added amplified the feeling of motion enough to convince our director that it's like, yes, it's working. The other things with her navigation from a gameplay perspective, with Delson, we wanted to separate and kind of make every piece of navigation different for every power set, and for her, we could just kind of dump everything into the pot and really go for it. So, her dash travels farther. There's less gravity. The neon clouds, you'll see a video of that, and her dash jump can kind of clear all the way up to the L train. So we'll see that.
So here you can see kind of a side-by-side comparison of Fetch and Delson dashing. You can see that, Fetch's dash down the left, it feels quite a bit faster than Delson's, even though it really isn't. You can see in this side shot here that she's just a little bit faster. Part of how we're making her feel faster is by increasing the field of view in the camera. This really helps give you kind of a faster sense of motion as the objects are kind of whipping by the edge of the screen. Another way that we're making her feel faster is by launching her power earlier in the animation cycle. You can see how Delson on the right, did it stop playing? Oh,
it's still going, it's going.
Okay. You can see how Delson on the right has kind of more of a wind-up, and he actually kind of pushes off and actually starts running a little bit before he dashes, whereas Fetch kind of launches right at that push-off moment, kind of explodes outward and then redirects forward. And lastly, just from an artistic standpoint, Delson's dash kind of manifests itself as these series of silhouettes, these stop-motion silhouettes, and so it doesn't have the same kind of forward motion that Fetch's dash has. Let's see. Another way that we improved Fetch's neon dash is through the use of the neon clouds Darren was talking about. You can see them as Fetch is dashing into them on the left here. If you start a dash at the same time with both characters, you can see how much faster Fetch feels than Delson using those techniques we talked about, which is the field of view and stuff like that. She's faster by about 4 seconds in this example, as you can see. Delson just really feels like he's plodding along by example. Fetch can move about the city in just a significantly more fluid and easy way than Delson. It really kind of feels like a whole new city when you're able to move this quickly. Zooming from rooftop to rooftop and dashing through gates and kind of gliding around.
Yeah, so one of the, when you hit the gates, I wanted to feel like you're going through a waterfall, like that kind of brisk, every time you're moving, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. If there's a game objective that can be completed by kind of putting a rubber band on the controller and just leaving it alone, that's not very fun. That's not going to be a fun objective. By putting these gates in the world, you have kind of micro objectives as you go. You're crossing the city, so you have this macro objective, but you're also like, you're steering, and you're like, oh, I got it. There's this kind of happy feelings continually as you play. Is there anything else on that? I don't know. Let's keep going. This is the only place you'll ever see Delson and Fetch race. You guys saw it live here. All right, the singularity. So Delson has the karma bombs, which are kind of the ultimate move for each power set. And so we had a new one for Fetch. We wanted to make a new one. It was a really good character moment. You talked about kind of showing the expression on the face, and that's a really awesome. Like this is our moment where we can kind of show the character expressing, because she's invulnerable. We can kind of move the camera around, and it's just like to relish the coolness of the move. Do you have notes on this?
This is your slide.
All right, let's do it. So there's lots of different elements, and we'll get to the video really, but let's just get to the video. You'll see these things. These words, you'll see them.
All right, that's fine. That's fair. This is basically the neon singularity here, and I want you to call attention to the kind of, I guess the sound was a little over here, but the sound actually plays a significant portion of this, where it's really get a good build-up, get this moment right before it happens, and talking about anticipation that Darren has. And the traffic cone will actually go by your head, you'll hear it, right there. So objects that pass by the camera will kind of give this whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. So when cars are behind you or characters behind you, you'll just pull them right in.
Yeah, there's a couple notes on anticipation for this one. There's the whole build-up initially, right? This whole thing is like, yeah, it's gonna be awesome, She throws it, it's kind of a calm, and then it builds up, and there's this pause right before it explodes yeah, right there. And those are all tools that we hope to try and like just amplify that moment and make it feel good. Yeah, parking tickets.
Yeah, don't stop showing that.
So I kind of wanted to take a moment to point out some subtle details you guys might not notice at first glance. So we're actually matching the timing of the singularity forming in her hands right to the animation of her hands spreading apart. You see the sparks flying out. Also right at that moment, her feet are sliding from the force of her getting pushed back. We had a little dust to her feet kind of kicking it up there. And so there's just a lot of little things that we're doing, right? Working with the animation team, the audio team to kind of get these things all together. So in summary, basically, good combat design communicates the mood and intensity accurately to the player, right? If something is a powerful attack, you want to make sure the effects and the sound and the animation, everything supports it. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of this feedback. Like I said, there's animation, there's audio, there's visual effects, there's controller rumble. The singularity has a lot of controller rumble on it. There's kind of the rumble that's happening in a jolt right as the effect goes off. There's AI reactions in Second Son, actually, when Delson would do his orbital drop, smoke orbital, he'd go up and the AI would actually start shooting. They'd be shooting at him as you're flying up. And so that's another button that we have. And these things all influence your perceptions, to aggregate the overall feeling of the power. And with that, we're going to pass on down to you guys.
Power. It's going to make it, maybe.
Let's do it.
Okay. So what do we push?
I think the arrow keys.
Just arrow keys? Hold on a
Try
second.
the arrow keys. I've been having to click it with a mouse, though.
There we go.
Can you grab that?
Awesome.
Science.
That's level.
Science.
Laptop's already happier.
Alrighty. I'm Justin from Respawn. This is Joel.
Hello.
And we are going to talk a little more high level, I think, than these other talks were. So Titanfall presented a bunch of challenges across a variety of levels, and we will go through them. You guys don't need to see that. All right. So, this is out of order. So one of the big issues that Titanfall faced was an unpredictable battlefield. So we gave players the ability to do a lot of things that probably weren't very smart, like call a Titan in whenever you want, save it. It basically created a ton of variables for us to manage, but I'm reading this out of order. I'm actually just talking. So let's start with everyone gets a Titan. No compromises here. So
well, we had to figure out early on the point, like we started Titanfall early on with everybody gets a Titan in the beginning, and then we found through massive play testing that it works and plays much better if you ramp up into Titans. So everybody gets a Titan, but you have to earn your Titan, and it helps pace the gameplay a lot better. So that's one of the roadblocks we had to realize that we had to get past pretty early in the process.
It started off with everybody in a Titan right away. So, but everyone gets a Titan, no compromises here. It was basically, it doesn't matter how good you are. It's not going to be, I kill 3 people or I kill 6 people, so I get a Titan, and the lesser skilled players don't. So that was a compromise that we were not willing to give up, and we stuck with it. Unprecedented number of variables. That's what I was talking about earlier. So you don't know what is going to happen when you're playing the game, and we didn't know what was going to happen when we were making it. So we can never say, at this point, there's only 2 Titans per team, so we understand that this is the craziness level that it can get up to, because people can do crazy things. They can get out of their Titan, they can fight from in their Titan, or they can just not call it in at all. And so, in doing that,
Well, I mean, what Justin's kind of getting at is the unpredictable quality of the game kind of made it so that we had to plan for everything. It's a first-person shooter. The environments have sight lines that we had to work with, and we're also dealing with 2 totally different scales. So that was like this. There's people that want to wall run and just play as a pilot. I mean, we'd have matches where people wouldn't call in a single Titan, so we had to plan for that as well. And situational awareness could be turned upside down in an instant. I mean, there was a phase where when you actually call in your Titan and get into it, it was very disorienting to actually get into the Titan and transition from that pilot feel to the Titan feel. So that was another thing that we had to, all of this we're getting at is just, it's heavy experimentation, heavy play testing, and getting all that stuff to gel.
And next, mitigating the Voltron effect. So Voltron was a term that we used in the studio, which was when one team is all Titans and the other team has none, which makes the game very frustrating for people that don't have Titans. So this was very, very common throughout development for a long time. That game was won because they had 6 Titans the entire match and we had none. So we had to fix that. So a couple things we did was give all pilots AT weapons, which is anti-Titan weapons, and allow them to rodeo. So some games create classes where this class is able to take out heavy weaponry or heavy armory, and we wanted to make sure that all players had that at all times, and the ability to rodeo if they're too close. The damaging enemies, AI pilots, Titans, all speeding up your Titan build time are things that we gave pilots so that they would want to go out and engage enemies and help them get their Titan a little bit quicker. We also empowered the pilots through our map design. So the high ground was consciously created so that, it was a conscious design decision to give the pilots their mobility so that they could get up high in places where the Titans couldn't get and kind of get a little depth from above. And
it also came down to this thing where, there's Titanfall's a little bit different because it introduced AI into multiplayer, which has been done in the past before, but we had to figure out how to make that work for Titanfall. So, I mean, like going back to the mitigating the Voltron effect, having the AI in the environment as essentially food, and letting the players kind of digest that food and build up towards their Titan, it actually helped. It was like a main feature or a factor that we had to put in play to mitigate, take it so that Titans wouldn't come in all at once. Everybody was kind of getting them at different speeds, and it kind of had this good aggregate of gameplay.
And then the last point on here is pilots always working towards a new Titan, so it doesn't matter what you're doing, your Titan timer is always happening. And the last point that's not up here is Titans are always taking damage as well whenever you hit them. So even if their shield's up, they still take damage. And that was another thing that helped pilots deal with Titans.
Which was a visual conundrum in itself. We had, from the art point, we had to figure out how to, give Titans a look that they were actually taking damage and stuff, something a little new to us. So we had this giant character on screen that had state changes, and even though they have shields, they're still taking damage underneath that shield, and so the armor would pop off, and it was just this visual cue to let you know that Titan's it's in a bad way, and it's volatile. But it was a huge challenge. I mean, we talked about it early on. Like there was one point where we were thinking we don't need to show that, but I think it's one of those things in the game that hopefully everybody takes for granted, but it's there and it needs to be there. If it weren't there, I think you'd notice it right away.
I agree. Next slide. These pilots are everywhere. So pilots are very mobile in Titanfall. We let players go everywhere, which was probably not the greatest idea if you wanted to make your life easy. But far sightlines for pilots was one of the huge issues we had when tuning weapons. So you want to prone con weapons, but when they can shoot clearly across the map and they're hit scan weapons, it creates different levels of pain because the pilots are also very fast. So you want them to be, you want to be able to kill something with it, but you don't want to be able to kill them at a distance. We also had a weapon that we cut from the game. It was an anti-Titan sniper rifle that pilots had. So they could get up somewhere, be really annoying, look at a Titan, shoot it with a sniper rifle, and the Titan couldn't do anything with it.
It was totally annoying.
It was annoying.
It was
and it's like 3 shots to kill a Titan. So we ended up putting the charge rifle in instead, which we shipped with, which is it glows orange, and it requires a charge so that you can't just pop out and hit the Titan. That ended up being the right solution, and there's a little bit of a pro and con with it, which the anti-Titan sniper rifle didn't have. So when you're glowing, you're giving away your position a little bit. You're more vulnerable. Guys can see you, but you can also do a lot of damage to Titans.
I mean, I would say something too. They're predictable, and the mechanics that the pilots have, we came to because we had this thing where we have this giant 20-foot tall walking character in the environment, and there has to be a way to deal with them. So the parkour, the wall running, the double jumping and stuff, I mean, I came into the project as like kind of a hardcore, real military shooter-minded player. And when I saw stuff like double jump, I was just scratching my head going, I don't know, is this too much? Like, is this the right thing? But one day when we had the two playing together and testing, they'd taken out double jump, and I realized right away we have to have these mechanics in. The mechanics of Titanfall aren't there just to be there, and they're fun, but they're not completely fun alone. They all have to work together. So double jumping, wall running, rodeoing, all these things, they work into, and they're there for a purpose that David can fight Goliath and actually bring that together. So one thing I was really happy with is that we doing the wall running, the double jumping, falling out of the air, 50 feet up, adding a jump kit and actually trying to explain that stuff. Artistically, the world of Titanfall has to explain and really justify all these mechanics that are happening.
All right, and the next thing we got 720 degrees of death. That is death from above, death from the side, death from everywhere. Allowing pilots to get all over the place basically meant that you had to watch everything. It makes learning maps actually very hard to do. It makes mastering angles and choke points and getting comfortable tough. And we had to deal with that, and we're running low on time. So they're fast and unpredictable too, but they were fast. So pilots used to be probably twice as fast as they are now, and that game was really hard to play.
It was a lot of it was like a dog chasing a fire engine where we would never catch the Titan, and it was just everybody's like huffing and puffing trying to chase after him. So you did a massive amount of motion model work, and trying to get those to work together.
Yeah, the Titans were also twice as fast as it was like.
everything was amped up to like a level 20. Like we'd taken the dial and just ripped it off at one point. You know, it was just ridiculous. So we had to put that dial back on and get back down.
But there was fun there.
It was cracked out fun is what it was.
Cracked out fun.
Super cracked out.
Titan combat was a hard problem to solve. So read and react. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure we had with Titans was the ability to go out there, read the situation, and then react. We wanted players to be able to kind of at a glance understand what they're fighting, what they're going up against, and how to combat that. We actually had 2 Titan primaries for a long time, so you could actually select, the XO16 and the 40 mil, and that created a lot of problems in that players. We used to have a Titan shotgun as well, and so everybody would take the Titan shotgun for up close, and then they would deal with take the XO16 at a distance, and there was really no vulnerability, so everybody would do their long range weapon, and then they'd get close and bumper car each other and pull out their shotguns, and it just wasn't very fun. It removed a lot of the strategy.
Turning into Rock'em Sock'em robots a lot, which is just not pretty. It was something.
And so, so we wanted that to work, and I think we did a pretty good job of that. Titans are huge targets. This was another thing where how hard is it to shoot a Titan? So it wasn't that hard for a long time. We ended up taking a lot of the weapons and making them projectiles versus hit scan. For those people that don't understand what that means, hit scan means I have my reticule over somebody, I pull the trigger, they instantly take damage. Projectile means there's travel time, so I shoot you and the projectile actually has to travel to you, which means there's a little bit more prediction.
And there's trajectory too, which kind of makes those gooser kills that people get with 40 mil really impressive because they're actually arcing it into the target, which is cool.
So the XO16 and the arc cannon are hit scan weapons, and all other Titan weapons are projectile. We also added the weak points as well to add a little bit more skill to that.
And the Titan shield, really.
And the Titan shield is, that's the last piece of the puzzle, but we gotta go to the jump. So we actually had a while where Titans jumped. So they were jumping on top of buildings, and pilots couldn't get away from them, and they had really no weaknesses, and it looked silly when they would jump on houses, and the houses wouldn't collapse. But it's a little fun fact, I guess, that people probably don't know. We probably built the game for a couple months, 3 or 4 months, where we allowed them to jump, and we took that out. They still dash. And then the shield was the last piece of the puzzle, so that was the last thing that we figured out in Titan combat to really make it work. And before that, your Titan would get damaged to 10% health, and it was worthless, and so you would just chuck it. But adding the shield and letting that regen made them a little bit more viable. Now we have 2 minutes to go through all this. So this was actually the hardest part, so we should have been a little bit more concise. Balancing 2 different classes against each other. So one thing we did not want to do was compromise the integrity of either class. We wanted pilots to feel like pilots and Titans to feel like Titans, and we didn't want their interaction to mean that we make compromises. So some people had the idea of making pilots have a little shield that would allow them to take damage from anything, but that would have made the Titans feel weak if you shoot them with your 40 mil a bunch of times and they're not taking any damage. So the cloak ended up being the better option there, where it reinforces both classes. So the pilot's a little bit more stealthy, still quick, still agile, unpredictable, and the Titan player, if he sees them, can still kill him in one shot. And it also did a thing that we really wanted to do, which might be a bullet point in here, which was making pilots want to go after Titans, because that was another thing. If you're a pilot and you know a Titan's coming, regardless of what you do, why don't you just sit in a corner and wait for that? And that's why we added so many things to encourage pilots to go after Titans. So things like, your build timer goes faster, you get your Titan quicker, obviously, that way. And then we added AI and all that other good stuff and gave you enough weaponry to combat Titans. Playing as either class must be equally enjoyable. So we did not spend 80% of our time making the pilot or the Titan, and then 20% on the other piece. We put a lot of emphasis on making both of them feel like viable options and making them both fun. Encourage pilots to engage Titans, we just went over. Locking motion models was pivotal. So that was probably one of the most important pieces, because you're building maps and you're building levels and you're creating jumps and environments that you don't know if they're going to work until the motion model, which is how your pilot and your Titan move, how far they jump, how fast they dash, how fast they sprint, until you have that locked in. That took a little bit longer than expected, but that was one of the biggest kind of hurdles that we crossed. And then pilots first, that's fine. 6v6 player count. That was a controversial thing that we put in, but I think it ended up being the right choice given the chaos of the game. And yeah, that's the end of the speech. Sorry, we went over a little bit still.
Oh no, take your time. We've got time for
okay?
questions, so you can.
I would definitely go into 6v6 because I think one thing that people should realize is that Respawn is a heavily design-focused team, and we came to the 6v6 not lightly at all. It was based on 6v6. You essentially could have every pilot, every player has a Titan AI buddy running around with them as well. And the levels also had this thing where if we had too many Titans on screen, they have these big Titan traffic jams and stuff. So it really came down to balancing the level, balancing the amount. I think we settled into 6v6 at some point where it just really felt like the right amount of Titan pilot on the screen when everything was really hitting the fan and it was going crazy. It just, with the AI, with the specters, all the stuff that was going on, it just balanced everything perfectly. If it was higher before with all that stuff, you felt like it was chaos factor. You're in an environment with vertical flanking, Titans, AI, all this stuff's happening, and it's like raw input. It's just coming in, and your brain was getting fried. So we found that with higher player counts, with like the full global thermonuclear war going on, you would just get exhausted. You could play for 20 minutes, and you'd be like, I had it. It was too much. So that's how we came to that number. I think Justin probably has a better explanation.
That was pretty good. You talked about frying eggs. No, that was, it was a number that the game dictated the number, not us. We played it at all kinds of player counts, but it was a very controversial thing, and it was one of those choices that you end up having to make these calls as a developer where you believe that this is the best number.
Yeah, so I think we can.
Yeah.
So we, now that we're just talking about 6v6, I think you guys realize we made an announcement for 8v8 Pilot Hunter where we just took the game down and trimmed the game down to full pilot on pilot, so you'd have to adjust your loadouts accordingly and make sure that, I've been waiting for that game type for a while, really excited that we announced it, and then we have a new mode we're going to be bringing out. This is all free updates, by the way. It's a 4-player mode where you're basically working against the AI in a defense mode. We also have another way of leveling up in the game aside from generations, which is called ranking, and you can choose to go the ranked path, and that's more about less about challenges and doing different types of challenges to gen up. It's more about I play this game mode, I level up, I keep going through these ranks. So it's been pretty fun to actually get to announce that here because that's the way I'm really going to be loving playing the game.
Yeah, so that's it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, you guys. Yeah, I don't need that back. I'm good. We got some time for questions. We got about 13 minutes for questions. If anybody, do we have a mic for people to ask questions from?
Oh, yeah, they're over there.
All right, go on. Yeah.
Sweet questions.
Anthony, you want to direct?
What's that?
I thought you wanted to skip.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is a question for the guys at Respawn.
Yeah.
Did the Titans ever have melee weapons? Was there ever a plan for melee weapons? Is this something you might consider for future titles?
They never had them for this game. I don't know if I'm supposed to comment on the future.
Okay, no, it's fine.
But thanks for the question.
Yeah, over here.
Yeah, so when you're talking combat realism, if the spectrum goes from total, artistic license to total brutal reality, do you guys have a sweet spot that you're looking for? I know the genres kind of, will vary, but is there something that you're looking for in terms of striking that balance? And then also, when you're trying to err towards the side of realism, how do you go about doing that? When in some places you're talking about totally created fantasy places, and then in places like for you guys where you're more traditional melee combat, you could really make it totally brutally real.
Well, I'll take the realism part. We actually don't strictly strive for realism. We strive to evoke realism, which is kind of a subtle difference. But basically, the main rule is, you're trying to create this content and these mechanics that deliver a certain tone and make the player think, oh, this is so realistic, But in reality, like, no one's that strong. No one can punch someone that many freaking times, and not, break their hands. So, and the kind of prime directive is, if it's not fun, don't do it. So we allow you. There's like in The Last of Us, if your pipe is on your back and you've got your gun out, you can like aim and press square, and you'll hit the guy with the pipe, like completely. It just the shotgun pops to your back, the pipe pops to your hand. No one cares. I used to care. No one cares. No one. So yeah, that's kind of on the realism angle. Anything from the sci-fi guys?
Sci-fi. I mean, I honestly believe that the role, at least in our place, the role of the art department is to completely justify, in the most realistic way possible, the cool game mechanics that Justin's team is coming up with. And we get to input on that stuff, but it's really like a fiction and a science that supports fantasy is really kind of the mantra of the art department, and getting that to work. And I know that Justin and those guys with the animators try to ground everything into reality as much as possible. Everybody here in this panel is it's the holy grail of game design. I mean, it's really justifying what you're seeing on the camera, because if you don't have like an emotional investment to what's happening on screen, you stop caring, and we don't want to go there.
Yeah, the important thing is it's not about justifying the game world against reality, but justifying the game world against itself. Like, as long as everything's internally consistent to the rules that you've already set up in that fiction, you're golden.
Okay, yeah, cool. I would echo the same thing. I mean, you're trying to, if the player sees something and they're like, that doesn't make sense, in the context of what they're playing and what they're experiencing, then that's going to take them out of the game. But as long as you don't do that, you can kind of do anything, really, as long as it feels right to the player. So usually the tone of the game and the world and everything, you want it to be self-consistent, and as long as you make it self-consistent, that's kind of the rule, I think.
Yeah, just respect the universe of the game that you established, I think, is just like a bullet point that I always kind of try to keep in mind. So yeah, I mean, that was just a little side note.
And it's really hard.
Yeah.
Yes, it's really hard to do.
Yeah, because I think that the biggest struggle too is that, like, visually you go for something, you're like, yeah, that would happen in real life. And then you realize that it's not conveying the right response for the player. Like, they don't, like, if it's like so real, like a guy barely bleeds out of his lip, you're like, did I hit that guy? I don't really know. But then if you like spatter blood all over the wall, and you're like, oh, I hit the shit out of that guy. So
you get these weird things. I see them all the time. Where the other day I saw a tree, and I looked at this tree, and I'm like, no fucking way that thing could actually exist. Look at that. If I put that in a game, no one would believe it for a second.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing.
There's a lot of stuff like that. There's a lot of realistic things that exist in our world that you try to bring them into the game space, and it just does not play out well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's scary.
Yeah, that's like my favorite thing. I love that.
Cool, down there.
Yeah, so on the topic of big game moments, for the Respawn guys, one of the coolest things in the game is Titanfall. What sort of stuff did you have to make Titanfall feel as impactful as it does? Like the actual dropping of a robot, right?
We wanted to drop a robot from space.
These guys talk
There was a scripter, there was an animator, there was effects guys that get together and we go, does this? And then we watched some movies that had these clouds that go out. What was it? Battle LA?
We saw some stuff
we saw some inspiration, and we said they should have a cloud that makes it feel like it's slowing down before it hits, so that it's sort of believable that a robot fell from space.
Yeah.
And then we wanted to make sure you could do it anywhere. We didn't want to limit you. We didn't want you to hit the button and go, oh, I guess I can't call it here, but maybe I'll find a place where I can. Like, to us, we wanted to make sure you hit the button, it comes down.
And yeah. I remember trying to sell it to EA, the idea of Titanfall, and
don't.
I'm good. Don't worry, I won't do it. Okay. So there's a point where there's a naturally long, you're calling the Titanfall and you're looking up, waiting for it, and we're like this big aha moment, and it became this thing with presentations where you're just sitting there, and we obviously were taking way too long with our Titanfalls because you're just sitting there waiting for it. Forever. And it was just gratuitous Titanfalling, So we had to trim that down. We added a warp fall transmitter so you could Titanfall even faster. But it gave an opportunity to the animators to give each Titan character, so they each had their own unique Titanfall, which I think really helped distinguish the 3 levels. So I don't remember the exact moment where we decided, but it's just one of those things where, I mean, even with the eject, some scripter, one of our scripters went in and scripted ejecting out of the Titan, and I'm sitting there shitting bricks because I'm like, oh crap, now I have to figure out how to make the Titan break apart with nuts and bolts and all this stuff comes apart, but there's ways to cheat that, and we did, and it came off where where it just worked, but it's a lot of happy accidents and people being creative and riffing, and it's like jazz. So.
Thanks.
Robot
It's
jazz.
like jazz.
Music?
Yeah.
Yeah, down here.
So for all three of you, do you work closely with the motion capture team, or do you just kind of get a picture of like Joel, like, I've been bitten, and then kind of reanimate it for the action?
Yeah, that's a super good question. Actually, it was a big turning point for me and the animators on the Melee team when, it used to be that only the animators would be at the mocap shoots, but then I started going to kind of bring the design perspective in. And yeah, it was like, it was huge, the collaboration with the mocap actors, because like, I would say like, okay, like we're going for this vibe, we're going for this mechanic, and the mocap actors were like great collaborators. Again, like jazz, like we'd actually work a lot of stuff out on the stage and say like, okay, the camera's gonna need to be here, so you need to put his face there and have your face kind of turn that way so that you can see the facial expressions, stuff like that. And yeah, it was really fun working with those guys and getting that stuff to happen.
You hit anyone with a stick?
I personally didn't. What I did do is to make some of the mocap more realistic looking. Like we would actually, like when a guy's hitting another guy with the pipe, it stops, right? Except we didn't want one mocap actor to hit the other one super hard, So it was actually me standing off to the side with like a punching bag. And this dude is like super huge. He's like a former football player and stuff, and I'm not, like very strong. So I'm like crumbling under the strikes of this, pipe attack. But yeah, like I got hit a little bit, but I didn't hit anyone.
This is related mostly to The Last of Us, but I'd like to hear something about how you approach encounter design, especially like how many enemies, what weapons they have, how
unfortunately, that would be a way better question for my friend Benson Russell back at Naughty Dog, who basically did all of our encounters, and my other good friend Matt Gallant. So unfortunately, I don't have any super good insight to that. But maybe the Sucker Punch guys, any word on?
I didn't do a ton of it either. Yeah. But I mean, when we were designing the powers for Fetch, we knew that we were going to have the battle mode, the battle arena. So we wanted it to. One of the things, like with the Neon Singularity, we give you control back earlier because we know that we don't want this long cinematic. Everything was supposed to be tight and keep the flow of the battle going.
Great, thanks. Down here.
Alrighty. This question kind of comes from some older games and multiplayer game design, mainly weapon pickups. How do you guys feel that weapon pickups should possibly how should, what is the best, God, how can I phrase this properly? I would say that, what do you guys feel would be the best sort of weapon placements, whether it be for like power weapons like a grenade launcher, rocket launcher, or just like a submachine gun, so to speak?
Sure, yeah. So in MP games, that's often a really great tool to create points of focus on the map. So like in games where you do have a power weapon, like it becomes a really like a point of contention. So you're gonna have a lot of focus on it, and like hopefully you want to add in some flank routes or make it really risky to get to it or something like that. But because of multiplayer progression, it's like kind of the new meta, if you will, for multiplayer game design. You kind of no longer have that because most people come in with their loadout, they come in with the weapon they expect to be using, and so you have to come up with other ideas for creating those points of focus. So in The Last of Us, our amazing multiplayer designer Aaron Daly came up with the idea of supply boxes that would actually give you the crafting materials you needed. So that became our source of focal points for the map. Respawn dudes, do you guys have?
I don't remember the question.
Oh. Well, we had a
I mean, I kind of do, but it was kind of hard to process, I guess, because we don't have placements. I think that's a super viable way of playing multiplayer games, and I'd like to see some of that come back.
I think in a former life, I worked on a game that had like Panzerfaust like placed around the environment. So it was like it was a good example of having a loadout and then going into a multiplayer game space and having power weapons still in the environment, which I thought was kind of cool. But it goes down to draws. You're drawing players into a risky, exposed environment or a place where they're going to take a sniper hit and stuff. So.
So you guys have really big weapons that fall out of the sky?
We have giant weapon platforms that fall from space down to Earth. But I think there was one thing early on with us where you would neck break someone and flip a shotgun into your hand, and that's how you'd get that weapon. You know, it's just kind of a neat detail. So I'm sure there's a lot of room to explore on how weapons and power weapons are handled in multiplayer.
Great. All right, so unfortunately that's our time. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I'd like to thank the rest of our panelists. Enjoy the rest of your PAX.